There are countless unexplained mysteries thought to be unsolvable, but over time, many have received answers. It wasn't too long ago that the location of the Titanic remained unknown, and the infamous Golden State Killer was only caught in 2018. Some of these mysteries are solved after much detective work, while others are debunked as fictitious. These are 5 scary mysteries that have been solved. Number 5. In 2017, a ski lift worker in Switzerland discovered 2 bodies in a receding glacier, bringing an end to a mystery of more than 7 decades. These bodies were not those of hikers who had recently perished in the cool temperatures, but were in fact the mummified remains of Marcelin and Francine Dumoulin, who had disappeared in 1942. Marcelin was a farm worker who kept cattle. His wife, Francine, helped with the farm work, but primarily worked as a school teacher. On August 15, 1942, the two set off to a mountain pasture where the cattle were fed. It was the first time Francine had accompanied her husband on the trip, as she was often pregnant and it was difficult to terrain. The couple never returned home, and their 7 children were left wondering what had happened to them. The village searched for the couple for around 2.5 months, but there was no sign of either of them. The children were split up into different families, though they would meet up on the anniversary of their parents' disappearance and climb the glaciers to pray. What happened to Marcelin and Francine remained completely unknown until 2017, when a maintenance worker spotted a backpack one of them had been wearing. The bodies were found side by side, dressed in pre-World War II clothing. Also found at the site were 10 bowls, a glass bottle, and a book. DNA analysis later confirmed these were the couple. It was determined that they'd likely fallen down a crevice where they died due to exposure and remained for 75 years. Number 4. The Red Ghost was a terrifying creature that tormented southeastern Arizona in the 1880s. It was supposedly a large red horse with a devil on its back. The story began at a ranch in Eagle Creek, where 2 women encountered the beast. One had gone to fetch water from a nearby spring. Not long after she left, the other woman heard the dogs suddenly begin to bark furiously and a terrified scream. She looked out the window to see the beast and its rider and barricaded herself inside until the men returned. That night, they found the first woman trampled to death. The following day, physical evidence of the Red Ghost was discovered in the form of hoof prints much larger than those of a horse and red hair. A few days later, prospectors camping nearby woke to the sound of hooves and another terrified scream. Their tent collapsed, and by the time they had climbed out, the creature was already running away. Again, the large hoof tracks were found, as well as red hair. As news of the Red Ghost spread, more and more people came forward with stories. One person claimed to have seen the ghost eat a woman, while another said the creature vanished right in front of him. Over the years, a few people have claimed to have reasonable, if odd, explanations for the beast. They suggested that it wasn't a horse, but a camel. The US Army had introduced camels into the area in the 1850s, using them to carry loads while surveying the area. The project was apparently abandoned when the Civil War began. Many dismissed the notion they were being tormented by a camel until almost a decade after the first attack. A farmer found a huge red camel grazing in his garden. Tied to its back were the skeletal remains of a man. The farmer killed the camel with one shot, and its corpse was enough to convince the locals that this was the creature that had tormented them. The only mystery that remained was who was tied to the animal's back and why. Number 3. In February of 1993, the Unsolved Mysteries TV show aired a segment about the grisly remains discovered by a Wyoming resident in a trunk he'd been given by a friend. Newell Sessions had received the footlocker in 1987 as payment for moving a shed off the property of John David Morris, identified in the Unsolved Mysteries episode as Gabby. For 5 years, the trunk remained in the shed, which Newell had moved onto his own property, secured with an old military padlock. In 1992, he finally broke it open. Inside, Newell discovered an ancient human skeleton wrapped in a piece of plastic, a belt, and a rotted carrier bag. Newell contacted police, who began what seemed like an impossible investigation. X-rays discovered a bullet lodged in the skull, and further analysis of the bones showed the person had been shot through the chest. Examinations showed that the victim was a Caucasian male, about 5'8" in height. The body had been buried before, but at some point had been dug up and placed in the trunk. The carrier bag found with the body gave investigators a significant clue. It was a Hy-Vee grocery bag, leading investigators to believe the remains were Iowan. Morris was also contacted, but he claimed he knew nothing about the body in the trunk. He claimed he bought the trunk in a yard sale in Iowa sometime in the mid-70s. Local detectives didn't think Morris had anything to do with it, but John Lumley, the local sheriff, believed he knew more than he was letting on. Shelley Statler was 19 years old when the bones were discovered. Her father told her he believed the body belonged to Shelley's grandfather, his own father-in-law, whom he had never met. Joseph Mulvaney was a World War II veteran who'd gone missing in the 1960s. He'd been married to Mary Alice, with whom he had 3 children, the oldest of which was Shelley's mother. Mary had another son from a previous relationship, John David Morris. After many years of trying to contact the relevant authorities, Shelley's mother was finally able to submit DNA to be tested for the body. They discovered it was indeed her father. Unfortunately, exactly what happened to Joseph remains a mystery. His wife has since passed away, as has Morris, who took his own life. Shelley believes her grandmother killed her husband and Morris helped to cover up the body. Number 2. The Cooper family photo is one of the more well-known supposed ghost photos that has floated around the internet. The photo first appeared in November of 2009. It had no backstory or explanation, but its creepy appearance meant it was shared across the internet. In 2013, it finally received a backstory. 2, in fact. On the same day, 2 different websites put forward 2 different backstories. One captioned the photo, "As the Coopers moved into their new home in Texas, they take a photograph of the family sitting together, but as the photo is taken, a body falls from the ceiling." Another website also claimed the image was of the Cooper family, taken not long after they moved into a house in Texas. However, in this version, the figure was only visible in the image, suggesting the hanging body was actually a ghostly photobomber. With no sources to back this up, both stories were suspect. One explanation for the falling body was a double exposure, with the second image having been accidentally taken upside down. However, others have pointed out how eerie the person looked, even if it were right side up. While it does look eerie, a reasonable explanation for the figure's posture was eventually found. Turned right side up, the picture appeared to be a distorted image of a ballerina posing. The story took a twist in 2015 when a man claiming to be one of the boys came forward on a forum with the username Robert C. He backed up his claim with a similar photo taken in the same location and claimed his mother had a habit of throwing away photos she didn't like. Apparently, someone had gotten a hold of one of the discarded photos to create the image. Who created the photo remains unknown, or how the 2 Cooper family backstories came to be. The fact the man's surname was Copper, close to Cooper, was also eerie, considering the people writing the backstories couldn't have known who the family was. A few years later, an artist named Richard Ramsdell published a book about the image, which promised to expose all. It was a self-published ebook which contradicted what Robert Copper had already posted, and was initially disregarded. However, the images in the book proved the author at least had access to the original photos. In 2020, the Robert C. account returned and confirmed he was in fact Richard Ramsdell. He had originally created the photo in 1981 and posted it to his own website. The Cooper story was added later by someone else, and Richard decided to mess with the debunkers with the Robert Copper posts. The story in the ebook was also fiction. The image was simply a standalone piece of art he hadn't thought much about until it went viral. Number 1. Greg Flanagan was alone in his room at the Elegrante Hotel when he died on September 15, 2010. Greg was found the following day. He still had a cigarette in his left hand and was lying on the floor near the door, as if he was trying to reach it. There was a small wet spot on the crotch of his pajamas, but nothing was unusual. While he didn't drink or eat in excess, he had a fondness for a less than healthy diet. Coupled with his chain smoking, investigators initially believed he died of natural causes. That was until the autopsy revealed severe internal damage, as well as a small laceration on his groin that spread from there to his hip. The images lined up to that of someone who had suffered a severe beating. The autopsy report read homicide. Nobody in the room next to Greg reported any disturbances, and there was nothing out of place in Greg's room. It seemed the attack must have happened outside the room, but detectives putting pieces together found it odd the attackers would bother to position the body in such a way. The damage would have been too severe for Greg to return to his room, light up a cigarette, and then collapse. Detectives suspected the people in the room next door knew more than they were letting on. The occupants were a group of electricians staying in the hotel for work. None of them seemed suspicious when first interviewed, but a possible attack from one of the men who had been drinking was the only thing that made any sense. More than a half a year after Greg's death, the investigators again searched his hotel room for any clue they might have missed. It was then that one spotted a small hole in the wall, near the door that led through to the room the electricians had been staying in. At first, it seemed to have been caused by a door handle knocking into the wall behind it, but the two didn't quite match up. After inspecting the hole from the other side, they realized it was in fact a bullet hole that had been filled in with toothpaste. After excavating the small hole, it revealed a clear path to the bed Greg would have been sitting in. Upon confronting the electricians with the new evidence, they admitted a gun had been fired in the room. One of the electricians had been playing with the gun when a round was accidentally fired going through the wall. The man who fired the shot was later sentenced to 10 years in prison. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.